Mehreen Baig is a well-known broadcaster and blogger, but what some people may not know is that she started life out as a secondary school teacher at the age of 21 and worked as a teacher for a decade before entering the world of television presenting. In her new book, Hidden Lessons, Mehreen gives a heartfelt and often humorous account of life in the classroom and the day-to-day challenges she faced with a bunch of often unruly teenagers. We're delighted to be chatting to her today on World Teachers' Day. How are you, Mehreen?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Very well, thanks for asking. And thank you for taking the time out to chat to us today. And before we talk to you about your experience as a secondary school teacher, I'd like to know if you have any standout teachers when you were at school that you would like to thank.
If I'm completely honest, I think the most influential teacher, the teacher who really changed my life, was probably my sister. So she was 8 years older than me and essentially taught me everything I knew when I was younger for my sort of for school, for my GCSEs, but then also taught me everything I knew about teaching. And I think it was very much looking at her, watching her, and the way that she taught me that made me want to go and do the same thing when I was older.
Yes, I was going to ask, what initially made you want to work in education? So obviously your sister played a part.
Yeah, I mean, I come from a family of teachers anyway. My brother's a teacher, my sister's a teacher, so that was part of it. But also, I mean, I wanted to be a doctor. I talk about this in my book. I didn't really realize that teaching was the job for me until I was in university. I was trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. I'd missed my medicine offer and I was tutoring students just to make a bit of extra money. So I was volunteering at this tuition center on Saturdays and I was helping out with my sister and my brother's schools. And suddenly it was sort of towards the end of uni when I thought, this makes sense. I'm good at this. I enjoy this. I like teaching young people, and that's kind of when the penny dropped.
Yeah, what aspects specifically was it about teaching that you most enjoyed?
I love young people. I find them funny. I enjoy the drama. I enjoy the innocence. I I enjoy sort of just listening to the way that they think. I feel like it keeps you young. And I think that moment, I maybe it's because I haven't fully grown up in my own mind that I sort of feel like I can still relate to a lot of the issues and the problems that a lot of them are going through. I remember going through so much of it myself, and that feeling when a student gets it. I know lots of people say that sounds really cliche and a bit cringe, but that feeling when a student gets it and they suddenly end up with a really good grade, or they suddenly end up writing something they didn't think they could, or they read a book and they enjoy it for the first time, it really is the best feeling in the world. I have, I've been so fortunate since I left teaching. I've done such amazing things and I've traveled and done, incredible experiences, but nothing quite compares to that satisfaction. It really doesn't. You can't put that into words.
That's incredible. I mean, for any students listening to this who might be considering working in the education sector, let's start with the teacher training. Tell us a bit about that.
So do you mean my specific experience of teachers training? Teachers training, I think, is very different from actual teaching in my experience. I feel like you get a taster, you get to observe lessons, and I got to, I went to a good school and a bad school, and actually I enjoyed the bad school a lot more. I just preferred it. I thought it was a bit more exciting and a bit more fun and a bit more lively. I got to see some bad behavior. Again, I talk about it in my book, this particular anecdote where a year 11 boy asked to go to the toilet. I don't know if you read the book. Have you read that bit? A year 11 boy
Will be. I'm halfway through.
asked to go to the toilet.
I have read this book. Mehreen, let's start again because we're going to do this a soundbite. So just say from that incident, talk about the incident from the beginning.
So there was one particular incident during my teacher's training where there was a boy in year 11, very tall, very big, and a female teacher who I was observing at the time, and he asked to go to the toilet, and the teacher said, no, it's nearly break time, you can't go. And this was during the era of coursework, where I had seen this teacher spend hours and hours for weeks on end sorting out coursework, getting students to rewrite it, rewriting some of the coursework herself. And he basically got up in the middle of the lesson, walked to the back of the classroom where all the year 11 coursework was laid out, and he urinated all over it. All over the coursework, in the middle of class, and I'll never forget it. And I'll never forget how calm she stayed. She didn't shout or scream or anything. She was calm and simply, you know, got the rest of the students to line up outside and follow the protocol and got it all sorted. And that really stuck with me.
And you weren't put off by that, obviously.
I wasn't. I think I was stunned, but I think at that point I was very much, you know, I wasn't quite a teacher yet. I still felt like I was almost still with it with the students. And then that was the moment where I thought, ooh, I'm not one of you. I'm actually, you know, maybe I'm more, I can't explain it. Let me think about that. Let me start that again. Hold on. I think that was the moment when I realized that I am not one of the students. I could see how horrific the situation was from the eyes of the teacher. And I realized, actually, I've got a new role in the classroom now. That's when it first kind of the penny dropped for the first time, I guess.
And you describe very vividly in your book that first day at school after qualifying as a teacher. Share that day with us.
So like I say, teachers training, I think you get a taster, but nothing quite prepares you for when you go into school for the first time and you get your own classes. You've got no one to kind of save you. You've got no one in that classroom to help you out if something goes wrong. They are very much your students back to back, 30 and 30 out per hour. And on my first day, I had spent weeks, if not months, preparing and buying teacher outfits and trying to look really professional and really high heels and brand new hair extensions. And I wanted to look official. And I got there and I just remember feeling really out of place and a bit ridiculous and really more nervous than I thought I would be. Teachers training, I was quite a breeze, really. So suddenly standing in that classroom and thinking, oh my God, I've got no one to introduce me and say, this is Miss Baig, I have to do this all by myself. I was terrified. I remember being absolutely terrified. And it wasn't just the first day. I remained terrified for weeks. I wrote out my scripts, I stuck them on the table, and the script said, good morning, my name is Miss Baig. Please put your bags under the table, just in case I forgot, because I'd get so nervous and my legs would be shaking. I'd hide behind the desk to stop students from seeing that my legs were visibly shaking. It was terrifying. And I don't know if people understand how scary it is, but standing in front of sort of 30 teenagers and trying to guide them and make them learn and control their behavior and make them like you, it's massive. And particularly when you're young, and then maybe particularly when you're young and you're female and so many of your students are so much bigger than you. Part of, I think, wearing the high heels and the really official clothes was me trying to convince myself that I was capable of controlling these students, a lot of whom were, you know, not only physically bigger than me, but they probably had some like more life experience than me in a really weird way.
Yes, I would imagine it's very difficult to go into a classroom as a newly qualified young teacher and be able to gain respect immediately over students that are only a few years younger than you.
Exactly that. I mean, when I was 21 and I was training, I was teaching A-level retake students who were 19. I mean, we were practically the same age. So to try and have some sort of authority, to try and gain their respect, to try and be taken seriously can be very, very difficult, not only because of how they will react to you, but also how you feel within yourself. And that's
and what state do you feel
time to learn how to do.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, at what stage did you feel when you entered the classroom, yeah, I've got this?
Gosh, I think I started to feel like I've got this maybe a few months in, when I started to put the scripts away and I started to just trust my own knowledge and just trust that I could improvise and just teach on the spot and not need a script to go by. I think that's the first time I sort of thought, okay, put the script away. And it went okay. The lesson went well. And I thought, maybe I'm quite good at this. But it was definitely a few months in. And I think that confidence grew over the years, if I'm completely honest. I don't think it was like first year's over. Maybe I went through a phase after my first year where I got a bit overconfident and I started thinking I know everything, which also was the opposite extreme and not good either. So when I remember my first year 11s did really, really well in their GCSEs. They sort of surpassed their target grades by a mile. And I thought, wow, I am the most outstanding teacher ever to exist. I've got nothing else to learn. And again, that also wasn't good, because you should always be learning and know, every year you'll have new challenges that you face. So it was probably a couple of years in when I genuinely feel like I really did get that balance right, and I really did get the hang of it, and I really was able to enjoy myself and feel like I could deal with any unprecedented, unexpected situation that I found myself in.
Sounds like the perfect training ground for television presenting.
Do you know, when I started TV, someone said to me, it was one of my mentors at the BBC, and they said, are you okay? Because it's going to be very terrifying. The first time you stand in front of the camera, it's going to be really scary, and I want you to be prepared. And I remember thinking in my head, I stood in front of 30 teenagers per hour for 10 years of my life. This is nothing. I feel like all the teaching leaves you with the ability to, like, when nothing scares you anymore. I genuinely feel like I can be put in any situation, and no matter how nervous I am, I kind of, at the back of my head, know I've got those skills to be able to just think on the spot and almost make it up. Sometimes as a teacher, you have to just make it up. There were so many times students asked me questions, and at first I would freeze because I didn't know the answer, but by the end of it, I was like a compulsive liar. I was so easily able to pretend that, like, I knew it, but I wanted to test them. You do that sort of ability to think on your feet comes very naturally to you when you're a teacher.
Yeah, it's all about the delivery, isn't it? And you mentioned your book, Hidden Lessons. What for you were the key hidden lessons when you were a teacher?
There are so many things that I learned during that time, not only about myself and how to look after myself, but also just things that I was completely unaware of in my own little bubble as a 20-something-year-old, about the wider world, about society, about where I stand politically, about about feminism, about race. There were so many things that you just don't think about as a young person, that I had I sort of had a crash course in learning about during my time as a teacher. But I think one of the main lessons that I try to really remember now is to kind of look after yourself, which is chapter 3. I think particularly as a teacher, you're in this profession, it's a vocation, it's a job where you want to give everything you have to these students. You've got such a massive responsibility to change these young people's lives and to better the lives of them and their families. And sometimes I think in the middle of that, I know I've seen it in myself, I've seen it in my siblings, I've seen it in my colleagues, you forget to kind of look after yourself. You forget that if you keep giving to everyone around you, you leave very little for yourself. And at the end of the day, you also have sort of a life to live. You need to have some sort of work-life balance. You can't, I know it makes you sound like less noble or less of a good teacher, but you have to also try and enjoy your own life, try and leave a little bit of space to look after your own health and your own well-being. And just look after yourself a little bit. I think I had a big period, I don't even know if I fully ever snapped out of it, when I was teaching, where where I was giving so much, so many hours, and I I completely forgot to look after myself. I forgot to, I wasn't even showering. I was just marking and staying with students, and I wasn't eating, and I felt really ill. And then even though I was sick, I was still going into school because I still wanted to teach my kids who their exams were approaching. And there will always be something. There will always be, that other year 10 class that you really want to carry through until the end of their GCSEs. There will always be that one student there will always be something. And in the middle of all of that, it's really easy to lose yourself, and we must remember not to.
Because you'd be a better teacher as a result of that, presumably.
Yeah, exactly that. You can't be the best teacher you can be if you are shattered and exhausted and unwell. And I think you also end up almost resenting the job a little bit. You end up, I know a lot of my friends, a lot of my colleagues, I know we often sat there sort of saying, I need to leave now, I need to leave, and searching for jobs online and thinking it's too much, but you're still not leaving because you feel guilty about leaving. You end up being in quite a negative space. I know I definitely found myself in quite a negative space where I loved my students and I loved what I was, doing with them, but equally I was tired. I was just burnt out. And I think to stop yourself from getting to that point, you need to start early to learn to have some sort of balance. Does that make sense?
And yes, it does. And having written your book, how different a teacher do you think you would be now if you went back into the classroom?
Oh, I'd like to think, when I first started teaching, I knew very little. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I found myself desperately trying to make the students like me, and then enjoying the fact that they like me, so I wouldn't tell them off because I didn't want to I was their favorite teacher, and I didn't want to upset that. I think I'm older now, and I think I am better at understanding that students appreciate and respect teachers who have some sort of discipline and some sort of authority. And as long as you can explain to them that what you are asking them to do is for their own benefit rather than because you want to be a dictator, I think students respect that and they respond to that really well. So I think I would never make that mistake of just going in there as their best friend again. That would definitely be a difference. And I'd like to think that I would work smarter rather than work harder, as in I think I would go in there and I think I would try to have a bit more of a work-life balance than I did the first time, to sort of just protect myself and last a bit longer in the profession. I mean, who knows? It's very difficult when you're in there and you've got these gorgeous kids who love being with you and need your help, and then you just end up being in that same cycle again. Even now when I'm tutoring, I end up, spending way too many hours marking students' work or sitting with them, giving them additional hours of help. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'd be any different in that aspect.
So you mentioned their discipline as being key, as being a smart worker, but what other key qualities do you think teachers need nowadays?
Gosh, smart worker, discipline. What other key qualities do teachers need? I think a lot of people think that if you are an Oxbridge graduate, you are going to be the best teacher, and certain schools only want to hire teachers who have got a degree from Oxford or Cambridge because they feel like that's going to be most beneficial for the students. I completely disagree. I feel like you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you are not able to make that information accessible and engaging for the students and relevant for the students, particularly nowadays, it's futile. you won't be able to get them to listen, they won't understand, they won't engage, they won't be interested, they won't see why it's relevant to their lives, and therefore you cannot inspire them and you cannot make them interested and learn it. So I think that is a key quality of a good teacher, is the ability to be able to take information and make it accessible, engaging and relevant for young people.
And how important do you think is the human connection for teachers these days?
I personally feel like, particularly in the time that we're living now, you know, it's been a really difficult year for everybody and for young people. And I think that human connection for teachers to acknowledge or show students that they acknowledge that they're not robots, they're human beings, they have their own issues. When they come into their classroom, they bring their own baggage with them, which is going to affect how they learn. I think they need to understand, I think students need to understand that you see them as human beings, you value them as human beings. And I think they need to see you as a human being too. So you can't just be a machine full of information getting through the lesson plan. I think you need to be able to adapt according to what's going on in your class that day, how your students are feeling on that particular day. And I think if you need to, and I don't think every teacher will agree with me on this, but I think obviously oversharing is wrong. But I think sharing to a certain extent for students to understand that you get it and you understand that sometimes people have a bad day and maybe you've been through what they've been through too. I think to some extent sharing that is very powerful in forming that connection between student and teachers.
Yeah. And what about for the students themselves? What message would you have for them about their teachers?
I think students don't always realize that teachers are real human beings who have their own lives. They can have bad days and good days, and they can't always come in. They won't always come in and be this, you know, bundle of joy who's ready to entertain. They might be exhausted. They may be, you know, going through their own stuff. So I think you need to be patient and understanding, just the same way I'd hope the teachers would be with them. I think they need to be the same way with their teachers, because they're just people.
So if anyone's watching this video and they have a standout teacher, school or member of the teaching support staff who you would like to thank, visit thankateacher.co.uk, where you can send a free thank you card to anyone working in a school across the UK. It's open all year round and it is completely free. It only takes a few minutes, and no doubt, Mehreen, it will make a teacher's day.
Those little things like getting a card or, you know, getting a really lovely letter or message or email, those little thank yous, I don't think parents and students understand what a difference it makes. It changes everything. When you're feeling exhausted, when you're feeling really tired and you get that one thank you message, it gives you that motivation and that energy to kind of keep going and keep doing what you're doing and doing it well. It reminds you why you're in the profession, why you became a teacher. Those thank you messages are so powerful.
Thanks so much for chatting to us today.
Thank you for having me.